All right, we're live. What's up, everybody?
What's going
Happy
on?
Thanksgiving and another day here in the US. Today with me, I got Gabe. He's one of our lead social media strategists here at Viral Nation. And we have a really cool topic that he had in mind, which is kind of debunking and addressing these top 5 influencer marketing myths.
Right.
So we put together a really cool list, and this addresses probably the most 5 common, would you say, type of things we see in the media, we see in the press, our clients reach out to us, and people always have these pain points or these assumptions that are essentially wrong in most cases about influencer marketing.
Right. And honestly, so firstly, thanks for having me again, Travis. Super excited because the last time that we did this, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. We spoke about Tesla before, so today we're talking about something a little bit more relevant to us in our industry. What inspired me to talk about this topic in particular is that I see articles, I see blog posts, I see all sorts of content all the time on LinkedIn, all over the internet, just talking about the do's and don'ts with influencer marketing, some of the challenges that a lot of people have faced. And what I find with some of these pieces of content that are out there is that a lot of times it's not as accurate. And with someone being like me that has been kind of hands-on, boots on the ground with influencers, we've identified kind of 5 top myths, I would say, when it comes to influencer marketing, or 5 misconceptions, I would say. And honestly, we'll have an open discussion about it, but these are just some of the things that I noticed, at least over the past couple of years now that I've been doing influencer marketing.
Sorry, I was muted. Did you guys hear anything I just said? Probably
I
not,
didn't,
right?
nobody heard
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So what I was going to say is when you're not talking, Gabe, if you can mute it, it'll make all of our audios better. I just found that out myself. But anyways, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the list here, guys. So let's jump over here and we'll start.
And by the way, I see in the comments, in the engagement of the live, a lot of people are asking if this will be pre-recorded afterwards. There will be a video afterwards, so you guys can hold on to it and check it out afterwards too.
Is it not showing?
It is black. We just see a black screen here.
That's fine. Number 1, we'll use this view because we have to.
Right. So for myth number 1, from what I've noticed and what people have been talking about, and a big misconception, is that influencer marketing is only effective for top of funnel awareness campaigns that don't necessarily aren't reliant on sales metrics or performance metrics whatsoever. And off the bat, this has to be one of the number 1 misconceptions when it comes to influencer marketing. It's not just the top of funnel awareness tool or marketing channel. It is a great one, but it's definitely not the case. I think a lot of this depends on how you're activating influencers, to be honest, because if I set up a campaign where they're going public and it's very static content, there's not a lot of key messaging, and it's really like a product shot, yes, I would consider that more top of funnel awareness. But there's certain things that you can do in your creative process, in your strategy process when working with influencers to make it more than just a top of funnel a brand awareness campaign. And I find that that's kind of the biggest misconception, especially when brands come to us, Travis, and are looking to learn more about the industry. This has been kind of the number 1 misconception.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues with that is, one issue I find with that is people are seeming to be demonizing top funnel metrics as if that's a problem, as if a brand shouldn't be targeting, views and impressions and reach and even more mid-funnel like engagement. That's where it all starts. You think someone's going to purchase your product or purchase your service if they know nothing about it, they haven't been introduced to your product, your brand, your service. So everything starts there anyway. So what's the problem with leveraging influencers for those metrics to start with?
Agreed.
But to your point, if you want to go further down the funnel, there are plenty of opportunities to do that. So let's quickly hit on a few of those other types of metrics.
Absolutely. So if you want, Travis, go over to the next slide here. Cool. So like Travis says, it all starts somewhere, right? So not to demonize influencer marketing as like a top of funnel thing, just like you said, but it's about how do we leverage platforms and where the content is being distributed, where the content's living, and how do we push the audience down the funnel even more. Obviously, like you mentioned, once we get viewership on there, let's figure out how do we get audiences talking about the product or even the content? How do we get them to engage, whether that's comments, whether that's sharing it, whether that, name it, depending on the platform. And then from there, how do we insert a call to action to inspire the audience to transition from the social platform, whether that's Instagram, Twitch, Pinterest? How do we inspire them and transition them over to your point of sale or your point of conversion, whether that's an app store landing page, whether that's an e-commerce shop, you name it. I think a lot of it is dependent on the call to actions that you're inserting, and also obviously the platform of choice. We need to figure out, how do we seamlessly transition the audience from social over to that point of sale? But would love to hear your thoughts there, Travis.
Yeah, one thing I like to, so my background is actually in more performance marketing and direct response marketing. Before Viral Nation, I was working on mobile gaming companies. So everything we did there was about acquisition. And it was really tough because I was leading influencer marketing and social there. And I was in a department that was really focused on installs, getting people to install the game. So one of the ways to hit some of those, conversion and lower funnel metrics is about the messaging, like you said, and the creative. So if you really want to get conversion, then you need to design everything around conversion. If you're going to make something really fun and spectacular, entertaining, and then also expect it to convert, those two don't necessarily go, or they don't coincide necessarily, right? So you need some strong messaging, some call to action, things like that for conversion. So it's not that you can't get conversion or you can't get sales. It just really depends on the messaging, the creative, the channel, the influencer, like literally everything around the campaign. So that's just kind of a point I like to bring up too, to address that.
Agreed, but to also challenge that too, because from what I've noticed is, while we have to have the influencer insert the key messaging and the call to action, and we need to be very tactical about where they're distributing the content, I think what's important too is staying authentic to the influencer and their typical style of content. I always tell this to my clients: we never want to, I would say, shove a script down their mouths when creating their content. Influencers speak to their audience in very, very unique ways. Everybody's different, and every piece of content that you'll see from different influencers is always going to be very unique. So we want to ensure that the key messaging and the call to action still stays authentic. We need it to be there, but I think it's about, how do we build a very authentic narrative around the offering? And that's what I've seen perform the best, to be honest with you, in terms of conversion and things like that. When we let the influencers be themselves to an extent and giving them that creative freedom.
Yeah, you know what? That's sort of a big problem we're still dealing with. I've been at least doing influence marketing for probably over 5 years now, and unfortunately, too much hasn't changed in terms of the brand allowing the influencer that creative freedom and to speak the way they want. I understand the brand is investing a lot of money. It's supposed to be a marriage, and there's supposed to be a relationship here and a give and take in terms of making sure the brand guidelines are in there, making sure the brand safety is in there. But I feel like brands too often are wanting to control the message, and then it comes off inauthentic, and then it doesn't work as well. And then they complain it didn't work as well. And then they say influencer marketing doesn't work. So it's something we got to battle with a lot. But ultimately, like you said, the more creative freedom you can give the influencer, since they know their audience and they need to be authentic, typically, as you suggested, the better the results are for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Cool. So I think we covered the first myth. Let's go on to the second one, because this one will get interesting. So the second one that we have lined up here is that influencer marketing is nearly impossible to measure beyond just like vanity metrics, like the views, the likes, the comments, etc. This has to be one of the bigger myths that I've kind of ran into, because this is something that we've gotten a lot of backlash on as well from, potential clients, is saying, hey, how do I truly measure the impact of influencers beyond just what I see on social or what I see on Instagram? And I think, just to touch on this, I think that yes, you can measure influencers by the views and by the likes, but it's tough to build a story around that, and it's tough to interpret really what impact they had against your campaign KPI. I think what's interesting about influencer marketing is that it's about the accessibility to the data. So what a lot of people will do is they'll grab like screenshots of the influencer's backend, or they won't even be tracking click-through, which is just, it boggles my mind, because that's kind of, one of the biggest things. I've seen that before. What's interesting about what we've been doing here is that we've been able to plug into the back end of influencers' socials, whether that's YouTube, whether that's Instagram, etc. And what we've been able to do is actually pull API level metrics. And the reason why I think this is important, Travis, is because on platforms like YouTube, for example, we're able to get very, very granular with the data. We're able to understand, okay, where did the audience view? We're able to understand how long did they view the content for. Because if you're doing a brand placement in the first or in the middle of the video, and we see that majority of the viewership didn't last more than a minute, your dollars pretty much went on, it wasn't effective. So that's what's interesting about kind of the API level metrics that we're able to pull. But then when you go one step further and you start tracking the click-through, you see individually how much traffic did each influencer drive to your point of sale or your point of conversion. And then from there, you're able to understand of that traffic, how many people converted to sale or installed or purchased, etc. But that's kind of my 2 cents on that myth. And, I think there's so much that you can do beyond just like the platform level metrics that you see from the front facing perspective. And it's about how do you get those API level metrics and how are you tracking individual traffic as well. But would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that one thing that's really important to know is whether you're working with an agency like us, you're doing it internally as a brand, is you need some sort of software, you need some sort of system that is actually, aggregating all the different metrics from all the different channels so that you can measure it, visualize it, analyze it, and report on it. So of course at Viral Nation, we have our own proprietary software where we're able to measure all of the KPIs directly through APIs, and other third-party sources as well. Bring it all together, piece together the actual success and metrics of the campaign. So that's really important to do. I like to use the expression that people use is like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, did it make a sound or whatever? I think of that in marketing too, that is if you're not able to measure it, in this case, use your senses to hear a tree falling, my analogy is then it never happened. The success never happened. If you cannot measure it, then essentially it never happened. So that's kind of the analogy I like to use. So with that in mind, let's go to myth number 3.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that analogy. That's one of my favorite Travis Hawley quotes. Cool. So the third kind of misconception that we see all the time is that, people are a little bit...
Wait, Gabe, 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
We actually have someone in the comments ask a question, so I'd like to keep it a little interactive if we could. Mark Meyer asked if this is more B2B or more B2C. So this is definitely a presentation more about, or a discussion more about a B2C. Of course, that's where influencer marketing is most mature, but we're definitely going to be doing more of these live streams to talk about the B2B world as well. So thanks for your question, Mark. Go ahead, Gabe.
Awesome. I was on mute, so I was talking for a little bit there, but so the third misconception is that influencers are only effective with younger audiences. To be honest with you, this is very, very subjective on who you're looking to reach and ultimately the type of influencer that you're working with. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for a brand like, we'll do like a Home Depot or something, right? It wouldn't make sense for Home Depot to go ahead and activate an influencer that publishes content around Minecraft, for example, because we know that Minecraft and like Fortnite, they yield a bit of a younger demographic. So to answer kind of this misconception is that it's very subjective on the type of influencer that you're working with. That's why I 100% always tell my clients and my colleagues that, before you start negotiating with influencers, before you start even having the discussion of working with them, tap into their audience analytics first. You're able to really understand where those age ranges are. But off the bat, someone that's in the industry like myself, I'm able to tell you right off the gate, just by looking at someone's content, that it might skew a bit younger, it might skew a bit older. A great example of this is what we did with one of our clients, Sears. Sears inherently was looking to tap into older audiences that have purchasing and buying power, because the nature of the sale that we were doing with them was strictly for like home appliances, so like fridge and like dishwasher and stuff that is much more expensive and a younger person probably wouldn't buy. What we did was we started looking at the types of content that those older audience members are viewing. For example, Pinterest was a great platform for us. We looked at Pinterest boards. Additionally, we looked at people that did like home reno and home design, people that develop content that would inherently resonate with a bit of an older demographic. That's just one example of how we kind of combat that. But to answer kind of the myth, no, influencers aren't just effective with younger audiences. It just depends on who you're working with and how you're working with them.
And one other thing I would add to that actually is, just like you said, definitely want to tap into audience demographic data so you clearly understand who you're reaching before you partner with an influencer. But another way, like more macro way to understand, is also which channel you're working with, what network. So of course, like you said, if you're working on Snapchat or even TikTok right now, as it's still pretty young, then you generally know the audience you're going to reach there. But say with Facebook, you know that audience is definitely much older. It's actually pretty broad. It's definitely much older. It's for the most part between 30 and 65, rather than people younger than 30, because people younger than 30 kind of grew up with the Instagrams and then Vine before Vine died, TikTok and Snapchat. So that's another way to think about it from a channel level as well. Let me go to the next one now.
Absolutely, I 110% agree with that. It's about the channel too. So let's go over to the next one here. I don't think your screen is sharing, Travis.
It's not?
No, not sharing.
Okay. Now it is.
Okay, cool. We're back. So the second last one that we have in store for you guys is that, and this is something that's not, it's not like a make or break, like it happens. And this is just I would say the nature of the internet. But a lot of times I hear that, influencers are being discredited for the work that they do, saying being an influencer isn't a real job. Like we hear this all the time with like esports guys and gamers in particular, is that people will say that, being an influencer is easy and it's not a real job and they should get a real job instead of making videos and playing video games, for example. This cannot be more, I would say, inaccurate. A lot of people don't understand the work that goes into producing content and then, of course, engaging with their audience. It's very, it can be very stressful for some. And I have a lot of friends that are influencers, and I hear about it all the time. I mean, the process for being an influencer, it can get tough, from ideating what type of content you want to make, to producing it, to publishing it, to engaging and then amplifying beyond that. And then, of course, trying to manage the business side of it, brokering deals and things like that. It can get tough. So the biggest misconception with this, in my opinion, is that people discredit the value that influencers bring to the table by producing their own content, engaging their own audience, and then, of course, selling your product or service. So I would say that it's the complete opposite. Being an influencer is actually a full-time job, if not more. I know influencers that work 70 to 80 hours a week, some. So it's definitely, it's a huge undertaking. And Travis, like, you produce content, I would consider you an influencer on your channel, LinkedIn. I would love to hear your opinion on this, because I'm not sure if you've ran into this, if people have told you this before, but it's just something that I've noticed.
Well, I don't know. I have a little bit of a bold opinion here. I think that this myth is like, who cares? Like, whose business is it if someone's a real job or not? We're marketers here. Do you want to leverage their audience and get results in your business or not? What do you care about what they do in their spare time, or whether they have a real job or not, or whether they're those damn millennials, all they do is use their phone and stay on YouTube? Like, that to me, it's really it's just a useless kind of thing to critique. Unfortunately, in the industry right now, because there are some shadiness in their fake followers, as Ross in the comments here mentioned. There is some shadiness around some influencers that people are trying to dirty up the entire industry and insult influencers, and so I really don't like that side of the industry. But ultimately, if you can find the right influencers to partner with, who cares if they're doing a real job or whatever your emotions are about their industry. We're here to make results for brands, and that's ultimately all that matters. So with that, 100%. Let's go to number 5.
Actually, just a quick pause there, because we got a really good question from Ross in the comment section. He said, one problem that we've run into, especially with a lot of the mom influencers on social, is that there are fake followers that also participate in engagement groups. They oversaturate influencer platforms / software and make it hard to find authentic influencers with organic engagement. What are some steps that brands can take to combat this trend? Travis, if you want to go first, go for it. I have a few thoughts, but you go for it.
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot of things you could do here. First of all, there's the smell test, there's the look test. Like, experienced marketers like us, it's actually very easy to know if people have fake followings or fake engagement, because we're very familiar with the ratios that likes, comments, shares, any type of engagement to followers should be. And if it's egregiously high or low, that obviously will bring in some suspicion. It's very difficult for someone to fraud their way into an average or a non-suspicious type of engagement rate and things like that. So there's that initial test, and then second to that, there are softwares out there and things like that you can leverage to look into how many fake followers, or something something people don't talk about a lot is ghost followers, and that's more of people who follow a brand or follow an influencer and they just don't engage. But that doesn't mean they're fake. So just because someone's engagement is lower too, it doesn't mean that there's fake following or a lot of fake following. I think people are overestimating how many fake followers are out there. There certainly are people who out there who have plenty of fake followers and are just being fraudsters. But in general, I think people are over-reporting and over-sensationalizing how many fake followers out there just because it's something to talk about. It's clickbait. It's something negative. Traditional marketers are upset that influencer marketing is taking budget from their other channels and their wheelhouse. So they got to find something dirty to say. I think it's just overhyped, and it's something we need to look out for. Absolutely, we have the means to do it, and we are doing it, and we're going to be doing it more, of course. But I think it's a much smaller problem than people believe it to be.
I agree and I disagree at the same time. 100% agree that I think people over sensationalize kind of fake and influencer fraud, because at the end of the day, if an influencer has garnered a huge following and then their content changes somehow, or they're just not publishing the same stuff that people want to engage with, it can happen organically. That engagement will drop. Firstly, we've never had an issue with influencer fraud for a number of reasons. One of them being the technology and resources that we have access to. It's very easy for us to tell if an influencer's audience is authentic or not by a score and AI and machine learning. Like, there's a ton of different tools that we have access to as marketers. But one thing that a lot of people can do, and ideally, Travis, I would love to have another session with you strictly focused on this topic, because we can go on and on about it. But what I've done a lot of times is I've looked firstly at the actual engagement of the influencer. So believe it or not, yes, you can purchase fake comments, but when you look at the comments, and if it's not necessarily relevant to the topic or the content, it's most likely fake engagement, right? I've seen like a ton of like emojis and like weird stuff that has no relevance, and it's fake. It's pretty obvious. But then you can take it one step further, because numbers are just numbers. When you look into the actual location of the audience, and you, for example, if I'm an influencer and my content is English content, it's inherently meant for North American audiences in the Western market, but majority of their audience might be located in like Pakistan or Malaysia or even India, where it's really cheap to buy fake followers and where a lot of these bot farms live. That's a big red flag, especially if they're producing content that is made for the Western market, right? So those are just two little things that you could even do if you have the access to like those audience analytics tools and stuff like that. You'll be able to do it from home or from your office. Just a few tips from me, what I've done at least off the bat.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Let's go to number 5 before my headphones die.
Yeah, last one and we'll wrap it up. Just share your screens, Travis, because they're just looking at us now. Okay, cool.
Sorry, guys.
And the last myth is kind of circles back to what Travis said about channels and platform approach. A lot of the misconception that I've seen out there is that influencers are really only active on like Instagram or YouTube, which is like, yes, the most popular platforms to activate influencers on. But to be honest with you, what a lot of people miss out on is looking at the other platforms and channels, and once again, understanding where the audience is living and where are they watching content. What I will say is that, yes, I agree that Instagram can get saturated with influencer branded content. YouTube, not so much because it's longer form content. But from off the bat, the request that I've gotten from a lot of my clients is like, okay, we only want to stick to Instagram and YouTube, which makes sense because it's what we're used to by nature. But there's already new platforms. There's Twitch, there's Pinterest, there's TikTok, like you mentioned. You need to get really tactical with your platform strategy, because if you're not thinking about where the content's living and where the audience is living, most importantly, you're going to slip. Honestly, your dollars aren't going to be used as efficiently as they should be. But that is a big misconception that they're only active on Instagram and YouTube. They're not. There's influencers and groups of influencers that live on almost every social channel that's out there now. So that's my 2 cents there. Travis, I'll flip the mic to you. I'll mute myself. I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think you brought up a few good points here. And one thing we need to always keep in mind is the strengths and weaknesses of each channel too. So of course, YouTube and Instagram are prolific for having the most influencer marketing, probably being the most effective in general. But it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So until Instagram Stories had the swipe up feature, meaning a link in Instagram Stories, which is the borrowed feature from Snapchat, the ephemeral 24-hour posting, it was really hard to convert off of Instagram. So a lot of people still were using Twitter and Facebook, where you could put links and drive people to your e-commerce site, to your website, for whatever purpose it is. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you want awareness, if you want conversion, you want engagement. So the fact that Instagram and YouTube are most successful and most used now is because they generally now have the most features to do full funnel influencer marketing campaigns, depending on what metrics you're going for. And as you know, say for example, as Facebook's organic reach has just died and dwindled, people have moved away from that, so they're just kind of consolidating on a couple of channels. But thank God, a new channel has exploded out of nowhere the last year, and that's TikTok, right? So now there's a new channel. It's exciting for marketers. We get to test out some new type of content, new type of audiences, new type of conversion tactics, new type of pricing. Right now, the pricing on TikTok could be exceptionally high and exceptionally low because people don't know the standard for that channel yet and how to buy influencer ads on that. Just like it was with Vine, it was incredibly cheap when Vine exploded. We were buying ads that were reaching millions of people for like $100. You could probably do some of that stuff on TikTok now, even though the industry is a little more mature. It's not going to be as easy. So it just really depends. There's a lot of things to consider. So that's why it's important, whether you're doing it in-house or you're hiring an agency like us, you need experts. You need people who really understand all the different channels, the strengths and weaknesses of all the channels, the strengths and weaknesses of all different types of tactics and influencers, so you can really strategize and synthesize this all together to put your campaign in the best position to be successful.
Exactly, like you said, depending on your goals and depending on the product and what you're trying to push out there, it's about how you leverage those native platform features, right? Like that's a big misconception as well. Like for example, TikTok. This is something that I think our colleague Emma spoke about on a video. Is that TikTok's now having the e-commerce link embed feature in the content right within the creative, which is going to be incredibly powerful. We'll see how that plays out. And we're already, with a lot of our clients, we're strategizing how we want to activate influencers, what type of creative, because the format of the content's very different than what we're used to, and the length and such. But 100% agree. I think it's less about, it's less about really the platform itself. It's more about how you leverage the platform and the native features there. But yeah, those are our 5 myths. We have a few minutes left here, about 3 minutes left from what we scheduled out. If anybody has any comment or questions or concerns, leave them in the live chat. We'll be happy to answer. We'll be happy to answer really any question that you guys might have. Oh, you're on mute.
You got a couple minutes left to answer any questions that might come through.
I do. Yeah, I have a few minutes that
cool.
we can definitely answer a few questions here. But
my headphones are about to die, guys. Yeah, that's how these lives go, guys. There are errors here. I forget to mute. I forget to change the screen. My headphones die. I'm imperfect. We're gonna make these better, though. I promise.
It's a learning process, and I think this is even a lot better than our first one too.
I think I need some more coffee. That's what I need. Some more coffee.
I had more than enough today, so I'm okay there. But I think we're good, to be honest. I don't see a ton of people asking a lot of questions, so I don't want to bore anybody. We'll leave it at that. I look forward to joining you on more, Travis. This is always a good time.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we got one question.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, we did.
Get after it.
Question: I would love to hear your guys' comment on thought leaders and SMEs as influencers.
Got it. Obviously, I'll take that one. So I've sort of unintentionally become a thought leader or a subject matter expert in influencer marketing and marketing social media, just as Gabe has as well. Some people may think that. So leveraging, this is kind of more of a B2B influencer type of discussion, right? And that's definitely the opportunity that's going to start building over the coming years as subject matter experts and thought leaders start using social more, right? Because kind of historically, most of them are mostly on Twitter, or they didn't have digital audiences. They were known in the industries at conferences and trade shows and things like that, but they didn't have a digital audience they could tap into. So now thought leaders across all different things, the Internet of Things and engineering and military and marketing, e-commerce, whatever it is, now people are starting to build digital audiences that they can tap into. So right now, that's why it's more of a supply and demand type of issue, that the supply is still sort of small in terms of how many thought leaders and SMEs you can tap into digitally, but that's growing exponentially. And the demand is really not there yet either, because the B2B kind of industry in general is still learning about influencer marketing, but now they're dipping their toes into it. So I think that's the two things I would compel people to do is, one, if you want to be or already are, consider yourself a subject matter expert or thought leader in some sort of category, start building a digital audience. Whether you want to monetize it or just have fun and help people and give value, do that. And then if you're a brand, keep an eye out for these types of people, because they're going to be popping up all over the place in the next few years, and you're going to want to leverage them and partner with them to help sell your product and services.
There. 100% agree there, by the way. You nailed that on the head. But yeah, we're out of time for today. Let's leave it at that. We'll, of course, be having another one of these hopefully real soon. But overall, I think it's, the live medium here on LinkedIn is just fantastic. I love seeing the live engagement. It's a fun time. So thank you so much for having me again, Travis. I appreciate it. You're muted.
I hate having to mute, but it makes the audio so much better. Anyways, thanks, Gabe. Thanks, everyone, for watching. There was definitely a lot of people. And happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Enjoy, eat a lot of food, and love your family. Bye.